Should be live right now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us. Call this meeting to order for the October 8th meeting of the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Dave, I see you're just joining us and connecting the audio, so I hope you can hear us, and invite you to join us on video as soon as you're able. Really appreciate everyone being here tonight. I know we had quite a marathon meeting last time. I think our agenda won't be quite as full today, so hopefully we'll be a little bit more on time in that sense, but still have some really good things to follow up from last time, and really appreciate all the work Alan put into that letter that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But let us first start with our roll call. I will go ahead and just call through, and if you could respond with here or with present, that would be great, just for simplicity. So, Mickey Varney.
Present.
Alan Alexander.
I'm here.
Tony Cato.
Present.
Diana Dickey.
Present.
Woody Dukes. Woody, you're on mute.
Present.
Wonderful. This also serves dual purposes to make sure all of our audio is working. Dave Friedenmacher.
Present.
Keith Norris.
Present.
And Paul Rice.
Present.
And I am also present. Wonderful. Well, we one note just for the agenda tonight. I just want to note that we have Tom Kupani joining us, who's going to just add a little bit more detail once we get down to the approval of the findings. Not really a full agenda item, but just noting that we will add that in. But otherwise, we're going to be going through, and we do have some public comment tonight. But sorry, first we need to go through our minutes. I'm jumping ahead already. So we had a lot of minutes. I hope everyone had a chance to read through those, and we need to approve them. Were there any adjustments, edits, revisions, anything along those lines that people would like to make before we adopt the minutes? Yes, Mickey.
Okay. I mean, I have a number of things, so maybe we should go through these every couple of pages. But first of all, is Tom considered staff? I was just curious.
I believe he should be. Is he not listed as staff on here?
He is not.
On the minutes, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Good catch. Thank you,
Very
Mickey.
good catch.
Okay. I mean, I have a couple other things later, but I didn't know if, since they're so long, if you wanted to go through every couple of pages or what.
Sure. Why don't we just go through? I'll just say the page number, and then as people have any errors or things they'd like to edit, just bring those up. So anything else on page 1, Mickey?
Nope.
Okay.
I had the approval of the minutes. It says all in favor, which is fine, but I think I had actually abstained since I hadn't attended the previous meeting.
It's a great catch.
Change that there.
Thank you. Okay, page 2. All right, page 3. Page 4.
I did have a question about, well, I guess it doesn't matter. In the minutes itself, when I was looking through Glenn Davis's presentation, what he presented was a timeline that had some inaccuracies in it. So I didn't know if we, leave it as written because I did not listen to the recording, or if we make some sort of a annotation to it or something down the road. I just wanted to mention that.
Could you elaborate? I don't know if I fully followed. You're saying that where in the minutes is that not reflected correctly? You're talking about the part where it references Glenn Davis's testimony or his comments? Right.
And maybe I'm wrong, but I was looking through a number of documents I had from back in September. And at the bottom of the page, when it says in February, a permit was issued to the developer to remove private property trees, the street trees in question were also removed at that time. I believe the street trees and maybe we need to clarify this, were removed on April 15th rather than back in February. And so I didn't know if when there's like a clarification for something, if it belongs in the minutes or if it belongs elsewhere. If that makes sense.
That's a really good point. And I appreciate your diligence on catching that, because that's a great point. Tony, I don't know if you have any comments about whether the minutes are, in this case, would just serve as a record of what was presented, or if they should be amended to be factual in that sense.
And I'm sorry, I was trying to find the location of what she was talking about. I would have to go through, if you send that to me. I didn't include every single piece of the minutes but I thought I left in everything that was the factual, at least what was in the minutes that were done.
I think the question is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mickey, if I'm misstating this, but I think what Mickey is pointing out is that the way it's written here is implying that all the trees were removed at the same time, but that actually that is not necessarily correct, and that they were removed at separate times. And so should we adjust the minutes to reflect that fact?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Okay.
Okay, like I said, I didn't listen to the recording, so I wasn't sure exactly what was said, but at some point in our records, I think we should have an accurate timeline represented.
Yeah, let me go back through. I'll listen to it and I'll adjust them accordingly. And then I'll run it back by the.
Yeah. I'm just curious, like I said, since I didn't hear the recording, and perhaps a better place to put that would be in our letter to City Council, just to make sure we have an accurate timeline. I mean, that may be the place to put it. I just wasn't sure.
That's great, Mickey. So let's, for the letter.
I'm still kind of chewing on that right at the moment, because I'm trying to look at the minutes and follow you while we're going through this. Well, that's factual evidence. So why don't you let me go back through the recording, and if you can include anything that you want in your letter, of course. So let me go back through and adjust the minutes according to the recording, because it should be according to what was done at the meeting. If there should be any clarification, I would probably do it in your letter, maybe.
That would make sense to me. I just thought I'd check, because I didn't know what the proper process was.
Yeah, I would only want to include in the minutes what actually took place at the meeting. And then there could be a reference to that, but I'd have to kind of go through that and take a look at it, and can't really do that right at this moment.
Understandable.
We can come back and adopt the minutes at the next meeting if you'd like.
Well, as you said, it depends on whatever is in the transcript, in the recording. So if this represents it, I mean, that's fine. We could always vote to approve them based on that once we get to the end of our review.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mickey. Going into page 5, any more comments or corrections? Okay, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and I believe that is all of the pages, at least the version that I have on my iPad here. So unless there's any more edits or corrections, I think, Mickey, I like what you were suggesting, that we could approve it based on, with the assumption that they will be updated based on the transcript for that line, but then also adopting all the other changes that you and Keith pointed out. If
I agree. I would so move.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the minutes as amended. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, seconded by Alan. Any further discussion on the minutes? We will move to approve, and I will quickly go through roll call. So Mickey,
Aye.
Alan,
Aye.
Tony,
Aye.
Diana.
Abstain because I was absent from the meeting.
Thank you very much. Dave,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
and Paul.
Aye.
Wonderful. The minutes are, I vote aye as well, and the minutes are adopted.
I
So thank you
didn't
so
get
much.
called.
And sorry, what was that, Woody?
I didn't get called.
Oh, Woody,
Aye.
thank you so much. I don't know how I missed that. I apologize for that. One of the things about not being in person is it's harder to go through. So thank you so much. And Tony, I would appreciate if you could let us know at the next meeting just about what that ends up being in terms of the final minutes, just so we all know for clarity's sake.
Oh, I most certainly will.
Wonderful. Okay, well, let us move into our public comment. We do have at least one member of the public here to offer comment for us. And I believe that's Tony Kramer. And Tony should be in the meeting here. Okay, there, now she's showing up on my screen. So Tony, you have 3 minutes. I want to make sure you have audio and video. And Mitch, I'm hoping you can help make sure that those capabilities are allowed.
There we go. Thank you, everyone, for letting me speak to the meeting. I guess I'm glad I wasn't trying to speak last week. And I would speak to the board, but a lot of you don't recognize me because the makeup of the board is different. But I would say that my very closing statement would apply to the current board. Tonight, I am commenting on the Riverfront Park and specifically on the amphitheater portion. I'm going to read from some of my notes. So if I'm not looking at you, it's because I'm reading off of some of my notes. And I just want to tell you that I made an effort, a very diligent effort, to be involved with the process of the Riverfront Park master plan and the follow-up. I attended the open houses. I spoke about issues. I wrote issues down. I attended to additional, I call you SPRAB. I hope that's okay. I attended 2 additional SPRAB meetings. I made comments. I left my personal information. And in all those meetings, I was encouraged to give my comments and was told that they were very valid comments. So I was validated. And I realized that all of the committee members, you're giving your time and your efforts and as volunteer. And so I didn't go back and try and bother all of the committee members because I'm busy too. And I didn't want to bother everyone. And I was fully assured that I'd be contacted. Well, lo and behold, on July 13th, I find out that construction has begun and I was never contacted. And when I contacted Public Works that day, I was told, and this is in quotes from them, that unfortunately, my information slipped through the cracks. And so after talking that day to the public manager and on further occasions, it was decided that it was too late in the process to consider my ideas now. And I know that SPRAB was not involved after the approval of the master plan, but I kind of feel like since I gave the committee my information 4 times and I was involved and I was encouraged and I was validated in my ideas, I do feel that the committee board was part of the process of losing my information. So I just would like to tell you that I'm really disillusioned and discouraged at trying to become involved in the public process. And I feel really disrespected. And I still strongly believe that my ideas would have been to the betterment of the project. My ideas were talking about some changes that could have been done for people with physical limitations and going beyond the ADA requirements. And so what I'm asking the board to consider is to just please be responsible with citizen input, the citizens that trust you as the board to listen to them. And when you give assurances and comments and validate what people are saying, that you really take that seriously And I don't know how you make an effort to follow through with that. But like I said, I do consider you part of the process. And so I'm really disillusioned that all of the things that you really encouraged me on, or the board, who were the board members at that time, I couldn't participate in on a later date because my information got lost and no one followed through. So that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Tony, for coming back and sharing that with us. I really do appreciate that. And I do want to offer a huge apology that happened. And I completely understand that frustration. And I want to underscore that I know for me personally, the citizen input and increasing that is a really big thing that I would like to see more of. And I think this is just an obvious situation where that we need to address this before we can expect more people to give their time to help improve parks across the city. So I really appreciate you coming back and sharing this. And I really want us to try and figure out how we can avoid this happening again to make sure we can bring more people into the process and not have them leave disillusioned, because that's not benefiting anybody. So first, I want to say thank you so much. I know a few other hands went up, but let's keep talking about this right now and figure out where some of this breakdown might have happened and how we can address it. Mickey, you wanted to say something?
Well, I wanted to say, Tony, thank you so much for coming tonight, and I'm sorry that your input was overlooked. I was curious in terms of timing, was when you were talking about sending messages, working with the committee, was that before the plan was approved?
I went to the open houses that were held at like Pringle. I went to, I gave written comments that are in, if you look in the master plan document, the written comments are in there. And then I went to 2 other SPRAB meetings in 2019. And then I went to SPAC meetings, and then I went to a city council meeting, and yeah.
Do you remember, do you recall who you spoke to when you were at the city? You were mentioning public works. Okay if you don't. But.
Yeah, recently I spoke to the project manager, Aaron Kimsey, is that his last name? And I know that at the city council meeting, it was really frustrated because, and I informed the mayor of this, that he made sure that Patricia Farrell, I talked to several times, and Peter Fernandez both assured the mayor that I would be contacted. And so I think part of it is just that there are all these different, and I spoke at SPAC too, who just had a little bit of peripheral involvement. And I just think that there are committees, and you as a committee and a board rely on other people who are actually employees of the city. And so somewhere in that citizen involvement, getting the information relayed from a board or a commission to the city, and I don't know how you all talk to each other in the lines of communication and everything, but it, I'm sure, is complicated. But being told that my information unfortunately fell through the cracks was a little hard to swallow.
Hey, Mickey, I think there was a little bit of lag on my end, and I think I talked over your last comment there, Mickey. Was there something else you were trying to say? Apologize if I interrupted.
No, I was just trying to set kind of a timeline to see when this had occurred, and I appreciate, Tony, thank you for providing that information.
Tony Cato, yeah, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just from what I'm hearing here, it sounds like there's 2 different things possibly happening. One is the input process, the public input process, and through the open houses and things like that, where that information that you had, Tony, was collected in different forms, whether, through surveys or in person on, whiteboard, whatever it was. So that information is collected, and it, from what I understand of those processes, it was probably considered in the different levels of the planning process. But what did break down was that whoever said they would get back to you didn't get back to you. I don't know what they were supposed to get back to you regarding, for greater detail of input, or just to let you know if they were moving in a particular direction on your input. What were you expecting them to get back to you about?
At the initial open house, I did talk to the architect who gave me some information. I have received conflicting information from different people about things that could and could not be done or were feasible or were cost effective. But the ideas that I submitted, there were a couple, and I was specifically told that a couple of my ideas were valid and to be considered. And so I was fully expecting to be contacted by, I'm not even sure who it was, Public Works perhaps, that were doing the actual final design phase. I was fully expecting to be contacted to at least know the decisions that they had made, to also know if they had even considered my suggestions, and to be further in conversation about the concerns that I brought up.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay.
Tony and Patricia, I don't know if either of you could help us with the process on this one. I know that with master plans, for example, there's usually an email list that updates everyone. And I don't know if with the amphitheater, if that was something that had a similar process, and if there was a list that maybe there was a disconnect there, or if it was because the list was discontinued. Perhaps you have more insight into that timeline.
So hi, Tony. Yes, I do remember her coming to the meetings and giving her input on making sure that we had access, appropriate access that was not segregated, shall I say, from the general seating areas. And so I did pass that information along to Erin Kimsey, who's the project manager in Public Works Engineering. So the way it works is once the master plan is adopted, then if there's money, then it moves over into engineering and becomes a construction project. And so that's one point of disconnect, potential disconnect there. And then the engineering hires a consultant to actually do the construction documents. So that's another point of potential disconnect. I know that you did speak to Aaron. I did tell Aaron about you and that he should contact you. I think he is just overwhelmed with, he's doing the library and Riverfront Amphitheater at the same time. So he's got a big workload. I know that you've spoken several times with him and that we did try to accommodate some of your desires in the current design.
Aaron did get back to me, and he was, I can't use the word receptive, but he did listen to what I said. He did go back, and it was pretty much a matter of, sorry, it's just too late.
My understanding from the last time I spoke to him about it was that you had reached some resolution about the design and the seating wall and the regraded area at the upper amphitheater and the whole lower area is accessible. So that was the last I heard about it.
I am not at all happy with the final, and I went back and even the seat wall, because I went down to the riverfront to look at it a while ago and realized how tall the seat wall is. So even sitting on the seat wall is going to be a challenge. I also asked about some signage, which I've been given someone's name to follow through with, and I can't even remember. But it wasn't just a matter of seating. It was the matter of, like you mentioned, the not having everything in the same place, which I think did happen. The other aspect was having places for people that can't get up and down off the ground, which is a lot of our population now as we age and have knees and those kind of things, not just people with me like that have severe disabilities. And so the seat wall kind of speaks to that and does help it, but it's really tall. It's taller than any of the ADA things and any of the furniture in my house. And it's a limited amount of space. So we did come to some like okay, that's what it is, but pretty much everything was, well, this won't work and we can't put this here and it's too late. So it's just frustrating to have. And I asked him, why is it so tall? And he's like, well, because the grade, and it's too late to add another like couple inches to the grade and those kind of things. So I heard a lot of the it's too late.
Yes, Nikki.
I had kind of a related question, and this is just because I'm new to this from the city's perspective. But I'm wondering, when it comes to ADA, I realize that there are certain requirements when you're building something. But what is the city's obligation when an individual brings up a particular request for accommodation? Does that change what the city is obligated to provide? I'm just curious, because I'm familiar with what happens in state with state employees, for instance, but I didn't know how that if that has impacts anything with the city.
That might be a question for Tom Kupani. I don't know exactly what that entails. I mean, we always try to meet ADA requirements.
Mm.
That's part of the job, and that's what we always strive for. So I don't know, Tom. Tom's coming in here.
Hi.
Hi, Tom.
So I'm not sure I exactly understand the question. Are you talking about use of the facility at a particular time, or are you talking about the sort of suggestions that were being made as part of the construction process?
I don't really know. I just know that when it comes to employment, that an individual can request accommodation for a disability. And so I was wondering if any of that transfers over to the city. I just don't know.
Sure. So as a general proposition, if somebody comes to us ahead of time with enough time to, for us to act, we are obliged to make a reasonable accommodation for that person's needs. It's a complicated, legal issue that's, heavily based on, the particular facts of the situation, but an effort is made to try to make, a reasonable accommodation if somebody, isn't able to access the facility as they desire. So, I mean,
Okay.
you can see it happens during sometimes during city council meetings where somebody informs us ahead of time that they're hard of hearing, and so then they're supplied with hearing amplification for the meeting so that they can meaningfully participate. So that's not a perfect example, but it's an example of accommodation. So with any new facility, there'll be some, we'll have to shake the bugs out, and there'll undoubtedly be some things that we didn't think about, and then we'll have to figure out how to make those accommodations. So certainly the process of making this facility available to people doesn't stop with the construction or with its opening. It'll be an ongoing process that will, the city is, committed to, following the law and making sure that people feel welcome and that it's open for them. I will also say that, and this is small solace for somebody who's gone through the process and then not gotten the follow through that they wanted. But I know that my experience is that staff works very, very hard to try to, when people make comments, to make sure that those comments get passed along, that they're shared, and that that we're very mindful of how important public input is in these things, and we take it seriously. That being said, it is a city of people, and you know, people, we make mistakes, and it sounds like we may have made a couple of mistakes here, but it also sounds like there was a lot of opportunity for input along the way, both at the SPRAB level and then also at the city council level. And so, to the extent that the same message got repeated at both those levels, and that was an opportunity for that information to get heard.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I just didn't know if there was any legal responsibility when a request for something was brought up ahead of time, that if that request was over and above the ADA requirements.
Well,
so that explains it.
Our obligation is to make a reasonable accommodation.
Okay,
So,
okay.
Sometimes
that works.
Some people want things that they can't have, and then we have to try to sort that out.
And I think,
okay.
Oh, sorry, Mickey, go ahead, please finish.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you. That clarifies it much better. It was more of an informational type question because I just didn't know in case something like this comes up again in the future. Okay.
And Tony, so I guess, Tony Kramer, to your point, then I want to, thinking through, part of the issue here is that you were not communicated back to before construction started. Is that a big part of this, is that you've presented this testimony, this comment at different levels, and that the end result would you felt like there should have been some closure on that, and that was not communicated back to you. Is that accurate?
Yes, I feel that I was not given the information in terms of, oh, we looked at this, we did an evaluation, we did cost, and we can't do it. I didn't even get that information back, that respect. There was no closure. I was told I would be contacted. I was not contacted. And so, like I said in my comments, I would just like you to take those things into consideration and kind of figure out the flow. I heard something about an email chain or something, but figure out how to make it work from your level to the final process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think, as Tom said, there's the trying to make a reasonable effort, but I think even if all of your recommendations cannot be accepted, you still deserve, as you said, to know where they were in the process, if that was especially as you've communicated that at multiple levels. And I just want to say again, just how much I appreciate you bringing this to us so we can fix this, opposed to just, I know that it would be very easy to turn away and just not come back after that situation. So I want you to know that I really do appreciate that. And I hope that we can use this as a learning moment for all of us and see if there are ways that we can continue to look at this situation and figure out, I mean, as Tom said, that the obligation doesn't stop just at opening, but continuing to find ways to make this project, but also future ones, accessible and also publicly accessible for comment.
Okay.
So Patricia, to bring you back in for just a moment, is this a situation where you can follow up? I believe it was Aaron Kinsey was the architect that you mentioned. Could you make that connection to follow up so there could be some closure in terms of more of the details of where things left off?
Sure. What exactly would you like?
Well, Tony, it sounds like the couple things that I'm hearing. One is just A, having a conversation would be helpful, but B, also hearing a little bit more of why the specific ideas that you were proposing were not feasible, and having that closure beyond just these aren't feasible.
Well, I did talk several back and forth. We had a couple Zoom meetings, or actually they weren't Zoom, they were Google Meet or whatever, with Aaron, and we did discuss things. He went over, but like I say, his response to most everything was, it's too late in the process. Well, I had tried to be involved since I think it was April of 2018. And so there's no real additional closure because he basically said, sorry, we lost your information or your contact, or what you fell through the cracks. And so so what I'm telling you as a board is just, can you try and make sure that people in the future don't fall through the cracks? I don't know how that happens, but I'm just throwing it out there to you, because it was very discouraging. So I don't, at this point, I don't feel like I need any more closure unless you want to follow that through and let me know that you've figured out a resolution to that. But in terms of, I spoke with Aaron quite a few times. I did get some conflicting information between what he told me and what I heard and what the architect told me, the landscape architect. So that was a little interesting. But at this point, I have closure with Aaron. I do have the name of someone who, when it was spoken about an ongoing process for accessibility, and my other word is inclusion, I have some signage issues that I would like to discuss, and I was given the name Patricia. I don't know, maybe you know, I'm not remembering, but I could look up on my phone of the person who is in charge of the vendors at the event, because I was told that nothing permanent would want to be added to the amphitheater. Like what I asked for is there's a seat wall, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. You guys are really busy, but there's a seat wall, kind of just basically a cement wall that you can sit on. And so people like me that can't get up and down on the ground and can't hoist chairs and those kind of things will sit on that wall. Well, I said, well, wouldn't it be nice if you could put on, like there's on buses that just say, please defer to people that need this, that have limitations or whatever. And I was told there can't be permanent signage because they don't like to put that in the park. So then I was given the name of the person who works with the venues to try and see if we can put something in the vendor package, which I fully intend this time to follow through on a regular basis and bother that person, which I do. I consider it. You guys are busy. The city employees are busy, but this time I do want to be involved rather than, oh, we're opening next week and that's not in the packet or something. So, but I don't need closure from Aaron, and we reached our conclusions, I suppose.
Patricia, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that, you know, a sign like that can always be added later and just have it flush to the wall. I don't see why that couldn't be added. So I'll just check in with Aaron on that.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too. And he told me that, I don't know who said it, but I thought he said that it came from, I'd have to go back and look at my things, but that they don't want any permanent signage like on there. But like I said, I have the name of someone, and I'm trying to figure out, and I can't find it on my phone, who I have the contact name, but I don't know, Tricia, do you know who puts the packets together?
Well, I see Becky George chiming in here.
Yes. Yeah.
There we go.
So I have her contact information, and I am supposed to work with her in terms of trying to figure out signage and accommodations for the events.
Correct. Yeah. So I have your contact information, Tony.
Okay.
And I will be getting in touch with you. Aaron did forward me your email and that kind of thing. So when we get ready to start hosting events and that type of thing in there, I'll work with Jennifer, Patricia, other city staff to coordinate signage and that type of thing. So I'll be your contact going forward with use of the facility, and look forward to working with you.
Okay. You will hear from me.
Right?
Well, thank you so much, Tony, for bringing this to our attention. I think this is a good opportunity just for us to think about the lines of communication and how we can make sure that folks that are making public comment on initial things with the open houses continue to be updated on projects, even if it switches departments, and seeing if there's other ways we can increase that coordination.
Okay.
But especially when folks like yourself reach out and give individual comment to the SPRAB and to individual staff members, I want to make sure we're including that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Tony Whitler, was there any more public comment that you received later on? Just want to make sure before we move on from this point.
did not receive any notifications from anyone. There is one other person that's participating in this meeting. But I do not have, let me just, if I can, maybe I can. Mitch, can you unmute Ted Burney? I'm sorry, I can't.
Yep, we're taking care of it.
So Ted Burney.
Ted, did you, or Mr. Burney, excuse me, did you have any comment?
I'm sorry, everything was just breaking up, so I just missed the lead in to me, so I apologize.
Did you have public comment you'd like to share with us tonight, Mr. Burney?
I don't know if it's public, but I would like to thank the SPRAB board for all their effort and all their consideration during our rather long meeting last week. And I don't know if it's appropriate for shout outs, but I think Tony did a great job. And Dylan, it was a hard meeting to moderate. You did a great job too. And although we came out sort of on the losing end, we as a neighborhood association learned a lot. It was our first meeting like that. And I appreciated all the support. And Jennifer Scott has been our project manager and has been very helpful whenever I've contacted her. So I don't know if this is appropriate venue to say that or not, but I wanted to express our neighborhood association's thanks to your thoughtful consideration. We've learned a lot and we're continuing to stay in contact with the city over other issues. And we're looking forward to city council's, I'm going to call it their tree meeting. But so we brought a lot of great light onto a subject that is fairly contentious. And so I appreciate all your support. And I thought it was a very fair process. So that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Ted. I think we all need a little more positivity in the world right now. So I just can't say enough how much I appreciate you coming back to share.
Well, everybody's a volunteer. And so we all have to recognize that as well. So I want to thank you very much for all you guys do. I think you have some long hours. There's a lot of prep for these meetings.
I want to return it and just to thank you for all the preparation that you and the neighborhood association put into a really excellent presentation and really coming and giving us a lot of good information. And, you know, I don't be a stranger as a neighborhood association. If there's other issues outside of appeals that SPRAB can be an ally on in terms of parks, green space, recreation programming, we definitely want to help in that way as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll be reaching out to you because I think a lot of citizens in Salem have great ideas and we all want to work together and make this a very livable community. That's our take on the whole thing. So I'm going to unmute unless anybody else has anything else, but we do appreciate all the effort you guys put into it. And we thank you for that.
Ted, I just want to echo what Dylan said, and just on behalf of the city staff as well, thank you for a very well presented, well done presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments before we lose Ted? Anyone else want to make a comment? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ted. Really appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to unmute or mute, I guess. And thank you guys. You have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move in. We have two action items back to back, both related. We have the approval of the findings and we have the letter to talk about as well. So Tom Kupani is going to be joining us to talk about the findings from one of the cases, but we can go through them one at a time to make this easier. So let me just pull up my notes real fast.
Do you want that item shared, Dylan? And I hope my audio, I know I'm having trouble with my audio, but do you want me to share any of these documents?
Let me ask that for the board members. Does everyone have the findings in front of them for now, or would it be better for a screen share in this situation? If anyone's having trouble accessing it, we can easily share it. Okay, hearing none. I think Tony will be okay for now, but okay. Let's appreciate that option. So let us start first with the Market Street. That should be the first one in the packet. And we have the written draft findings, fairly straightforward in terms of the findings. and the vote and the abstention from Dave. And are there any comments or questions about this before we move into approving? Yes, Dave.
Actually, I recused myself. I didn't abstain. I recused the recusal. I didn't participate in the process for that at all.
That's a really good clarification. Thank you so much. Make a note of that.
I'll make that change.
Were there any other comments about the findings as presented? Okay, hearing none.
Dylan, I think, Tony, when you make that change on David, just double check the count.
Okay.
You're right.
I think it should be a 6-1 vote with David's recusal.
And I think the word dialogue might have a typo in the continue their dialogue to find alternative design solutions. Very minor, but if we're making a couple of
yes, you're right.
I just caught that. I didn't see it before.
No, you're right.
Do we have a motion to approve the findings as amended?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you so much, Alan. Do we have a second for the motion to approve the findings?
I'll second.
Second by Mickey. Any further discussion on the findings? Hearing none, I will go through roll call and I will make sure to call Woody this time. So Mickey Varney.
Aye.
Alan Alexander.
Aye.
Tony Cato.
Aye.
Diana Dickey.
Aye.
Woody Dukes.
Aye.
Dave Freidenmacher.
I abstain.
Abstain. Perfect. Keith Norris.
Aye.
And Paul Rice.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Okay, so the motion carries for the findings for the Market Street appeal. Now we're going to move into the Salem Heights or the Wren Heights case. And this is where I think Tom is going to give us a little bit more context before we adopt this. Tom, are you able to jump back on?
So my comments are really about just following up regarding the civil penalty that we assessed against the owner. So it doesn't really pertain so much to the findings as it does to the letter that's being contemplated. So I don't know if you want to hear about that now or you want to hear about it after you've worked on the findings.
Why don't you go ahead since you're here now, and then we can, that way we can just have that knowledge for both of the conversations at the same time.
Okay, so last week, our code enforcement officer, Colin Armstrong, issued a civil penalty letter, and it assessed civil penalties against the owner of $2,250 and the appraised value of the trees at $59,0830. So the total penalty in the case is going to be $81,5830. If the developer had done it correctly and gotten the permit before he cut down the trees, he would have had to pay a $40 permit fee. And so, there were concerns about that, it's easier to ask forgiveness than it is permission. We're trying to send a message that, no, that's not the case. We want people to follow the law. And so this is a way to send that message. And so I know folks were frustrated with the fact that it took us some time to issue that penalty, but as I had explained at the last hearing, this was sort of a new circumstance for us. We hadn't really contemplated this particular situation where there had been a land use process. The trees had been approved or contemplated for removal, and then somebody doesn't do that last step that is necessary and doesn't get a permit. And so it took us a while to sort it out. And as part of the working session on the 19th, how to do this better is undoubtedly going to be part of the conversation. And so, going forward, things will happen in a much more timely fashion. So unless folks have some questions, I'm happy to answer them. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate that. Mickey, yes.
I always have questions, don't I? Well, I was just kind of curious, does this fall into the category as regular fees or tree violations? So the money goes into the city tree fund?
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to verify that.
And Tom, I had a question. You said two different amounts that added up to the 8158. What were the two different categories that you mentioned?
So there was the civil penalty, which is the fine essentially for not following the rules. So that the fine is $22.50, and then the 5908, the code requires that if somebody removes a tree without a permit, that they also pay the appraised value of the damaged tree. And so the 5908 was that value, taking into account that the tree was slated to be removed. And so it would have a different value than a tree that we expected would be there for 20 years.
Thank you. Any further questions for Tom? Okay, hearing none, let us move into the findings then. Thank you so much, Tom, for adding that information and clarifying for us. So everyone should have the findings in front of them. I think the count is correct on this time, on this one, but is there any discussion or comments about the findings as they've been presented? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the findings as presented?
I move that we adopt the whatever is stated.
I'll second it. We adopt the findings as presented.
As presented.
And Paul, I see your
I'll
second.
second it.
All right. Do we have any further discussion on the motion at hand? Hearing none, let us vote to adopt the findings as presented. So Mickey Varney. Oh, we lost. There you go.
Okay, aye.
Aye. All right, Alan Alexander.
Aye.
Tony Cato.
Aye.
Diana Dickey.
Aye.
Woody Dukes.
Aye.
Dave Friedenmacher.
Aye.
Keith Norris.
Aye.
And Paul Rice.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And so the findings are approved. Thank you all so much. Dave, I want to ask one clarification. I have been saying Friedenmacher, but I heard someone else say Friedemaker, and I just want to make sure, which is your preference? So I'm always saying it correctly.
Friedenmaker.
Maker, okay, thank you. I apologize for saying that wrong before. I will make sure to do that correct. Okay, so let us move into the letter that Alan has written for us, the next item in your packet. And I looked over this, but all the credit goes to Alan for putting the effort into making this letter. So Alan, do you want to give any context or comments about the letter before we discuss?
Well, I think we sort of approached the letter because all of us are pretty frustrated with the process. And I think we wanted to make a statement to city leadership that there's got to be a better way of doing business. And, this may have been a one-on situation, but it's just, I think none of us really, when we came time to vote, we voted out of practicality and not necessarily out of our heart. And I tried to be fair about it. I tried not to paint the developer as being the villain, but speak to the process. And so my comments maybe sort of, I guess, broad at times because I'm focusing on the process. and not this individual case.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alan. We can open this up to comments now from the board, and I imagine we can make amendments to it, edits, whatnot, and hopefully we can avoid wordsmithing to the extreme, but try and focus on the big ideas and changes, that additions or things that we need to remove or adjust. Dave, go ahead.
I have some comments. It's not really in terms of the letter per se, but about maybe something that should be in the letter. And I look back at land use case. I'm going to refer to my notes. I made some notes for myself. I look back at the land use case that they went through, the subdivision adjustment 19-02, and it included conditions for the dedication of right-of-way for the street and for the construction of a half street improvement in the area containing the trees. These are the trees that were in question of the tree removal appeal. This is in light of trying to get a better process. The land use case decision gave tentative approval for removal of those specific trees in question. So I think there was some confusion in terms of what is tentative approval in the land use process, first of all. During the hearing for the appeal of the tree removal permit, I recall the city arguing that the decision to remove the trees was already a done deal. It was already part of the land use decision, which is of course further confusion, I think. I concur that the decision to remove the trees really was part of the land use process, but the appeal was not part of the land use process. And my argument is that if there's some way that we could fix the land use process so that when a tree is decided in a land use process to be removed, if there's an appeal, it stays in the land use process. It doesn't seem like to me that it should be coming to SPRAB for an appeal for this type of a tree removal, that it should have been resolved under the land use process. And I'm not sure why the appeal couldn't have been heard in that process, since the decision was effectively made in that process. So, and those are my comments. I'd like to have, or at least I'm proposing that they be part of the letter.
That's a really wonderful point, Dave. I think that is something that could fix a lot of these issues by putting it at that part of the process. Keith, I see you have your hand up. Mickey was next, but unless you're responding directly to what Dave was offering.
I was just going to second that idea. That was my primary comment in here, as well as a recommendation to have the city look at those two areas of code on the land use and the tree permitting process and see where there's an opportunity to streamline that a bit and avoid these conflicts that will inevitably occur. So I just was backing up David's thought there.
Okay, and Tom, messaged me that he would like to speak, but Mickey, if you want to make your comment while Tom's coming online, that way you can reply to both if needed.
Okay, all right. No, I just wanted to mention bring up what I mentioned previously. I don't know if we need a timeline in here, because I view this document, we're sending it to City Council, and instead of them having to go back and review the case, et cetera, sometimes I think it's important to have, documented the process, which would include when the permit was issued that, had the provisional okay to remove the trees, when the trees were actually removed, the fact that the city sent a reminder note on March 10th, which was before the trees were removed, and then the permit was approved on June 25th, effective July 28th. So to me, just having that in there just as part of the record, because that's what occurred, I feel it should be important, but I think that's up to the rest of the board members if they feel it's pertinent.
I think that makes a lot of sense from my perspective, Mickey, just to make sure we're having all the information. But Tom, I want to give Tom a chance to respond to both those comments, and then Mickey, let's come back to what you're offering there in just a moment.
I just wanted to comment on the idea that the land use decision was a tentative decision. Mr. Davis talked a little bit about that. Tentative in this circumstance is a term of art, and what it means is that the Planning Commission has made their decision. The development is finalized at the point that it's built and that the plat is approved. And so, although it says tentative, the land use decision has the force of law and is, legally binding on the on both the city and on the developer. So it wasn't like, okay, well, this is what we think we're going to decide. It's decided, and it's just there's this other process that happens once everything is built. The reason that the appeal came to SPRAB was because you weren't there to decide the land use decision. What you were making a decision on was the permit. And so the right to appeal a permit issuance is one that SPRAB has jurisdiction over. And so that's why it came to you. I think one of the things that we're contemplating as part of the process going forward is that there would be a mechanism by which consideration of what happens to the trees is a much more explicit part of the land use process, and that people would, be able to explicitly describe, comment on that. And we don't know where the council is going to go with that. But the input about what should happen to the trees, there was lots of conversation. I think folks will remember that, initially the developer wanted to take out, and I may have the numbers wrong, but 19 or 20 trees, and we convinced them to save 17. And so, there's lots of robust conversation about that, but it maybe is not happening in quite the way that that's as explicit as people might like, because it's packaged in with all the other land use things that are happening when a development goes through, how big the building is, how far away from the street it's going to be, those sorts of things. And so I think sometimes those details get lost. And so I think one of the things that we're going to try to talk about is there a way to make the sort of decision about trees more explicit, and so that people have their opportunity to comment at the time that the decision, the functional decision about the tree is made, and not, at the 11th hour, because I don't think that serves anybody very well. It certainly doesn't serve the public very well in wanting to comment, and it doesn't particularly serve the developer very well, because, they're making decisions and expending money based on what the decision they have before them. And so you can't have a process where, you're at the 11th hour changing things around when the plan has been in place. That being said, not getting the permit is a colossal mistake on the part of the developer. And it's something that, the Public Works Department, wants to prevent from happening again. And, we're working hard to try to, figure out what's the best way to get these two systems to meld together, and make sure that, people follow the law, that there's a consequence if you don't follow the law, and that the public has input in the process all throughout. So I gave a little speech. Maybe that was a bit more than you guys actually needed. But.
That's good background, Tom. Thank you. It is helpful to know, and I appreciate knowing too what's going to the city in terms of some of the recommendations and how that might be already playing out. And I do want to say I appreciate that you and city staff have already been coming up with some ways to address this. And I think, Alan, you said it best, that we all left with a lot of frustration with just the situation we were put in. And I think, as Thomas said, no one contemplated that situation arising in the way that it did. So it's a really good opportunity for us to address it for the future.
And, we have ideas, but of course, the city council is going to also have ideas, and we're going to take our direction from them. So, but these are some of the things that we're anticipating are going to be subjects at this upcoming meeting.
That makes sense. Dave, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I applaud the effort that it's being made to try to streamline this process, because I don't think the developer should be told that they've got an approval of a street with a tree in the middle of it, and then they get penalized for cutting the tree down later under any circumstance. It just doesn't seem right. It seems like the permit should be simultaneous with the land use. Once that land use is approved and it has a street with a tree in it, then the tree's coming down, that permit should be issued. And I would applaud any effort to try to streamline so that those two processes work together.
Great point. Are there other comments in the letter or ideas that should be included?
Dylan, just a question for clarification on the letter. Is this a letter that will be signed by us as the board, us as individuals, you as the chair? Kind of what's the typical signatory on that?
Tony Whitler, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually I believe it's the chair's signature, but it's assumed to be with the full, with the consent of the board. Is that still accurate in this case?
Yes, if you're signing as the board chair, that represents your decision, your motion behind that.
So I would propose then that if it's possible, I think we could adopt this letter with two adjustments. One is we should agree on a sample sentence or so to add in here that would accommodate what was being suggested in terms of the land use decisions. And second would be Mickey's suggestion of adding a timeline, both of which I don't think are too big of lifts. I think, Mickey, as you pointed out, the timeline was included in the materials, so it's really fairly easy for us to pull that into this. A proposed sentence I was just typing out is that we could add toward the end here that the board recommends that council work to make tree preservation a more prominent and public component of land use decisions, with the potential of even having an appeal process like this being associated with that stage of approval. I'm very open to wordsmithing, but just trying to get at both of the comments that were proposed there. One, in terms of just making this a more public part of the process, and then two, having possibly even appeals at that stage. Patricia, I see you're chiming in.
Well, I guess I just would like to caution, and maybe Tom can clarify this, but my understanding is if it's part of the land use process, it goes through the planning commission. So are you saying that you want the appeals to go to the planning commission? Or I guess I just wanted to make clear that you understand kind of what you're asking.
That's a very good clarification. I appreciate that, Patricia. Thank you, because I don't think that was the intent. I was mostly pulling this up very quickly, so that's good to make sure we're not unintentionally giving away the that ability to protect the trees. Mickey, I saw your hand up went up as well.
Oh, I was just trying to, okay, so if it's in the planning process, and once that's approved, the tree removal was, I was just kind of thinking, I want to make sure the public is included in the process with being able to appeal. And so this is totally down the road than what it is now, but I'm just thinking of the whole posting of the trees, et cetera. I mean, this is going to be a big change.
Yeah, Patricia, yes.
I mean, maybe you just want to say, to word it somehow, that you think there needs to be clarification in the process of, something a little more vague to let council chew on that in their work session.
going to be my suggestion as well, is I think keep it a little more vague, as we want them to look into these processes and their potential for overlap and conflict, and not necessarily make a particular suggestion other than to say, we know it's not as good as it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we could
To look into the code, or to look into the processes around the overlap here.
I'm going to delegate a little bit here, Keith, and do you mind chatting that as a sentence for us to consider? Or, I think what you said there about looking at the processes for consideration makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'll get that to you in a minute. I'm only speaking out, then I am it.
It's always harder to recall.
But yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Does everyone, I know we're kind of at a wordsmithing stage, but I think we're so close to having this letter be adopted that we don't need to punt it to another meeting if we can avoid that. But is everyone comfortable with the general idea that we are proposing here in terms of the language and adding the timeline? Okay, perfect.
Well, the timeline was included, but not specific dates. It was basically the gap between approval, tree removal, application for the thing, so that the space and the timing was included. It just didn't use specific dates because I was looking at policy as opposed to a particular instance.
Mickey, did you want to respond?
Well, maybe we don't need the specifics. Let's see. It just says that permit issued well after the trees were cut down. And maybe that's all we need. I mean, maybe we don't need more details. My intent for the timeline was to offset what was in the minutes, not necessarily to go into a lot of detail here.
When you look at that sentence again, or that paragraph, Mickey, are there any words that you would want to change or strengthen just to make it fit more along, even adding it? I guess, are there any simple changes that maybe would align with that?
Well, I think it's important that the developer was reminded that a tree permit was required before the trees were cut down, and then the trees were cut down, and then the permit was requested. So, I mean, I think that's pretty important as to what occurred. I'm not too sure how to word it.
Well, I wonder if what you just said there could be added as an observation in the section that Alan has here of the 4 different observations. And so we could just reiterate that timeline exactly as you stated as an observation, that the decision, that there was a reminder from the city, then the trees were cut down. And if we could spell it out there with that, instead of adding a full timeline, then that would at least add that level of process detail opposed to having it in paragraphs.
That sounds good to me.
Can I delegate again, Mickey? You seem to have the timeline perfectly, or at least pulled up in front of you. I haven't pulled it up yet from the previous packet. So if you could propose that in terms of a paragraph that we could include here, I think that'd be wonderful.
In chat?
That only if you have it in front of you. Otherwise, if we need to, we can say that I think we can adopt this with just the added timeline, and then we can add that in later. Well, we can do that.
Yeah, that's fine. Or while we continue, I can at least put the dates and stuff in chat. I mean, if that would help.
Well, I think as we have Keith's paragraph in here, I want to make sure everyone can see that in chat. I know sometimes Zoom, it says this to everybody, so hopefully you can all see that. Is everyone comfortable with the language that Keith used? It's a little bit more generic, but also gives us more room, more flexibility to not accidentally have a situation like Patricia commented on. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that we have the letter that's wonderfully written by Alan with the adoption of the paragraph that Keith has included that we would put at the end here right before in conclusion. And then we would also add a observation that just simply lays out the timeline that Mickey is sharing with us. And otherwise that this letter meets the needs that we have. If that sounds appropriate, I would love for someone to make a motion for us to adopt this letter with those 2 changes.
I make a motion, we adopt the letter with those improvements.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Heard a lot of seconds. I think Woody was the first, so Woody gets the second there. And any further comment on the letter before we move to adopt? Okay, wonderful. I will go through roll call now. Mickey Varney,
Aye.
Alan Alexander,
Aye.
Tony Cato,
Aye.
Diana Dickey,
Aye.
Woody Dukes,
Aye.
Dave Frieden-Maker.
No.
No? Okay. Keith Norris
Aye.
and Paul Rice.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So we have 8-1. Dave, I hope that wasn't a situation where you were trying to make more comments that I didn't hear when we were going through discussion. I apologize if there was a Zoom limitation or anything there.
No, we're all right.
Okay. You are always welcome to vote no, but I would hate for technology to be the reason that we don't have good debate on SPRAB. So we are now through our action items, and we have some information reports. First, we have Mission Street Parks Conservancy. Sorry about that. And Christine Shute, I believe, was in the room with us. So Mitch, if you could please make Christine, allow her to turn on audio and video to give us an update. Hello, Christine.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Can you see me?
We can see you, we can hear you, and we did receive the written report that you sent us ahead of time. So we all,
Okay.
we've all had a chance to review that, but I want to give you a chance to make any additions or verbal comments and introduce yourself to SPRAB, because I don't think many of us have met you in person yet.
Yeah, thank you. I really don't want to read my report to you. It sounds like you've had, well, obviously you've had a very interesting meeting so far, and I've enjoyed it. But I did want to make myself available for questions. I'm Christine Shute. I'm the president of the Mission Street Parks Conservancy Board, and I've been the president since I think March of this year. But time is really out of joint for me lately. But anyway, probably for you as well. I think the report speaks for itself. I did attach a copy of our newsletter for those of you who'd like to get more information about any of the topics, and I was disappointed to see that the links didn't transfer live, so that you can't just hit the links within the newspaper or the newsletter. But you can get more information at our website, which is missionstreetparks.org. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I encourage you to go there and take a look at it. Also, the map that we're working on developing of Bush Park, the map that that shows all the beds and all the plantings, lists the plants and their Latin names and whatnot. That map is now live, and that's also at missionstreetparks.org under the plants tab, and then there's a little note that says location map, and you can see that one of the things we're working on with one of our grants. I don't know if we're supposed to, if SPRAB is supposed to vote on the approving, amending, commenting on, or whatever on the MOU, the memorandum of understanding that we reached with city staff, and that is working its way through the process. I don't know if that's on your list of things to do tonight, but if you have comments on that, I'm sure happy to hear them. And anything else, thanks for your time. Thanks for your work.
Thank you so much, Christine. I know I just have a couple comments about the MOU. I don't believe we have to formally adopt this one. I think we, with the work plans, it looks like that will be a different step later on. But as far as the MOU, I don't think we'll vote on that tonight. But it's very good to know that it's out there. And I don't know, Patricia or Tom or Tony Whitler, who the questions would go to on this, or Christine in some of these cases. One of the questions I had actually, Christine, for you is, I see that good partner, the Conservancy will endeavor to do the following, and one of them was attaining the 501c3 determination. And I was curious, are you currently a 501c3, or is that in the works right now?
No, yes, we are. And we've had that for well over a year.
Okay, great. And I also noticed that it was one of the things was providing monthly minutes from the Conservancy and agendas to SPRAB for our monthly meeting packets. And I know we haven't had that in the past. And so I was just clarifying that that is something that then we'll be seeing in the future as part of this.
Yes, and I guess what I'll be doing is probably having those sent to Tony.
I think that's the best avenue. Tony does a wonderful job of packaging everything up to make sure it gets to all.
Okay, great.
And the last question I had was just on number 14 in the MOU on page 4. It says the Conservancy will notify the city if the Conservancy plans to, and it has 3 things. One of them is promote the park to city residents. And I just, this might be very technical, but I was just a little confused by the wording there because I imagine that is very much the goal of the Conservancy, of the organization. And so I didn't know if there was more background to why that was included as something had to be notified. It seemed to be somewhat of the purpose of this partnership.
I think I would defer to Patricia on that one. Patricia, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So that is one of the main goals of some of the changes was to make sure that we're working hand in hand with the Conservancy. And so that we know when they're doing some sort of big public outreach process, because we're often in the midst of also doing a lot of outreach. And so we want to try to speak with at least one voice, or at least know what the other people are saying at the same time, because we always have lots of messaging going out to the city all the time about parks and Bush and Deepwood and all the other ones. So that's what the attempt was on there, just to get some more communication.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying.
That's all I have.
Do other board members have any questions or comments about what was presented? Yeah, Dave.
No, I think.
Oh, sorry, Paul, go ahead. And then Dave.
I just after reading all that, I just have to applaud the Conservancy for all the work they're putting in to make you know, the park a more beautiful and welcoming place to go, and certainly the effort going into identifying all the plants and trees and so forth. I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Dave, you're up next.
I wanted to echo the same sentiment. I really appreciate all the hard work and the expertise that's going into this plan and your work at the park. I did have one question. It's just information really for me. I was reading on, you were talking about the white oaks and enlarging the circles. Mm-hmm. How does that help the white oaks? I just don't know.
It helps in a number of ways. For one thing, the trees, if you clean too much out around the trees, they miss all that organic material like leaves and mulch and whatnot that works its way back into the soil and acts as a way to feed the trees. And so by putting the mulch there, it allows more organic matter to collect there. Another thing it does is it discourages people from, well, it doesn't really discourage people. It protects the tree roots from mowers, for example. There's no need to mow right up next to the white oak tree and maybe unintentionally whack the bark and make a big wound on the tree. After a few of those, trees can really suffer can suffer disease or even die from being hit by mowers often enough. And it also, the mulch, if there is traffic around them, foot traffic even, during the wet season, it spreads the weight of the foot traffic or any other traffic out a little bit so that the soil compaction is reduced. So, and those are just some of the ways that tree circles are really good for trees.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Sure. I bet you have them around your trees.
I don't have any trees.
Oh, okay.
I'm in a townhouse.
Any other comments? Okay, well, thank you so much, Christine. Really appreciate this, and congratulations. I know you're still relatively new in your new role as leading the Conservancy, so thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you more.
All right, thanks a lot. Nice to see you all.
Wonderful. Moving through with our updates, I see we have Mylan on the phone, and we have you should have all received Mylan's update. So if there's any questions or comments for Mylan, please bring them up now. I will start with one. Well, sorry, Keith, were you about to talk? Go ahead.
I was just going to say this mapping effort across the city, cataloging the trees is really cool, and I like it a lot. And mapping the spots for potential future trees, and I mean it's a huge undertaking, but I think it's a great project. So appreciate the work that Mylan and the others are doing on that.
I echo that completely. One of the questions I had, Mylan, for you, and is as you're looking at later on, it talks about planting almost double the amount of trees as in previous years, and numbers coming soon. But I know that we obviously from our canopy report have certain areas like on the eastern side of Salem that need more canopy, and especially areas where trying to find on the equity front in terms of city and urban areas. We know that the heat island index and everything happens, our heat island effect. So I'm wondering if this map doesn't look like there's a lot of space over there. And I'm just wondering if that's something where double the planting, if we're trying to find any sneaky areas we can put in some trees to try and even out that part of town.
Well, I would say Patricia could probably speak to this as well, but we sort of have a focus from a program from the Oregon Department of Forestry that we've worked with them on an overlay that sort of shows the neighborhoods that are underserved with that sort of thing that relates to a number of things, socioeconomic things. But we are focusing on some of those areas, and what you see on the maps that I provided is just sort of a little snippet of each area, but we are focusing on areas that relate to that map and areas that are underserved. We will try to plant areas where we see that it's going to provide the most benefit across the city to actually improve those areas at the same time, not just focusing on places where there are already trees. I would say that it's, for me, being the urban forester, focusing on areas where there are trees. There's also areas where people will help us take care of trees, and for us to be able to plant more trees, if we are going to plant more trees going forward, without money for staff, a big part of that will be us planting trees in areas where residents will themselves help us water those trees, because we don't have the staff to do that, I think, at the moment. So moving forward, there, it's unfortunate that a lot of trees will be planted in areas that aren't those areas that you're speaking of, but we will focus on some of those and probably put some of our staff effort into planting in those areas where we can follow up with the 3 seasons of watering and just some of the aftercare that it takes to have a tree survive, a new tree survive in those sort of underserved areas.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Mylan. And it's a good reminder that Keith and Alan, I think this was before you started, but we did have a very active tree subcommittee last year. And I know part of the reason we were on hiatus, waiting for Mylan to start to work with him, and then COVID hit and things have been derailed quite a bit. But it's a good reminder for us to revisit that. And for Alan and Keith, and really for all the board that isn't on that, we're talking a lot about how could we better incentivize trees on private property and getting people to be more active in this canopy cover increase and trying to get them to be stakeholders in that process. So something we should be revisiting, and hopefully now that we're getting a little bit more consistent with our meetings and figuring out all the technological aspects of it, we can have that sometime soon. But any other questions for Mylan while we have him on the phone?
I had a question. Well, and also a comment. I love the maps, the interactive ones with all the information. I mean, it's just amazing the tools we have these days. It's really, really helpful. No, my question was about the settlement, because I know there was a lot of public interest in the Gattes, settlement for the topping of the trees. And I was wondering if that's public information for the amount of since it was settled out of court. I was just kind of curious because I'm anticipating a question or something from that potentially.
Well, that would be for Tom. I don't think it's been made public yet. And I just was sharing that, that's something that we were going to be able to replace and replant as a city staff once it's done. But they have agreed to a settlement, and I don't know if Tom wants to speak on that or if that's something that you guys will be aware of later on.
We're attempting to finalize the paperwork on that. And so until everything's sort of buttoned up, I'm going to hold off on giving a comment, but I'll make sure that you guys get the information for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mylan. Always appreciate the updates. And once again, congratulations on those maps. Those are really helpful. Look forward to looking at those more. Moving into Parks Planning update. Once again, we're doing the written updates now, so hopefully everyone had a chance to review those. And I know Patricia jumped on. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Diana.
Yeah, not actually a question. I just wanted to give a quick update because Gear Park is the top of those of the updates that we have, and because I'm the liaison for Gear Park. And I had a conversation with Rob, the Romanek, the planner, last week, and we've actually had a couple conversations. So one of the things, and it doesn't mention it here, but that I had a conversation, if any of you are familiar with Gear Park, so Park Avenue that cuts across by the state hospital from like between Center Street and over to where Gear Park is, so like Center and State Street. I wish I had a map I could show you, but there's a section of Park Avenue that runs along the state hospital campus. And it is completely unpedestrian friendly. So if people are trying to access the park through Park Avenue, there's like no sidewalk. It's and I had wondered about this because it's, you know, it's not very friendly. It seems like it's private, but it's not really private. And I chatted with Rob, and he said that back when that new state hospital was planned, one of the conversations that had happened was it's sort of it's private, but it's a public easement. And that was the part of the agreement when they developed that property. So they can't close it, but it's not like a public street, although the public could drive through. And so he actually told me that through the outreach that they've been doing for the Gear Park master plan, that's been one of the issues that has surprisingly been a bit controversial and a little unexpected. Wasn't expecting a lot of comments on that. And so they're looking at that. I mean, I think most people will access Gear Park through from the State Street side. And apparently in one of the other neighborhoods off of Illinois Avenue, which is a little bit more to the east, they put just one of those little walkways so you could walk into the park. And that was kind of many years ago, the compromise to not having access on Park Avenue. But he said that they may also be looking at having some more conversations with the state now that it has been many years, and maybe there's maybe there's more interest in having some access there. So anyway, I just wanted to update you on that because that's been something that I've definitely noticed. It's really that section of the street. It doesn't have a sidewalk. It doesn't have anything, and it's state hospital workers drive through there really quickly on their way to work. So it's a little unpedestrian bicycle friendly. So. Hopefully more to come on that in the future.
Thank you for that. I've run by that and I didn't know what it was either. I actually turned around at that part, so that's good to know. I also experienced that feeling. Patricia, a quick question I had for you was in Secor Park, it talks about a new feature on the city's website. Well, instead of a ribbon cutting. And I was just curious if that's something that's live or what the plan was for the new feature in that sense.
I think it's going to be a video and maybe some drone footage that they've taken and some photographs that they've been taking during construction. Yeah, and then, sort of a virtual ribbon cutting. Other than that, I don't have any information exactly when we're going to be posting that, but I'll let you know.
That's great. Any other questions for Patricia?
Yeah, Dylan, I didn't see it in the report, but just something I observed at Minto Brown recently was some fencing that went up with habitat restoration and progress signs. And was just curious, I assume that's for the turtles out there. And maybe that's something that's been discussed before I got on the board, but just thought it looked like an interesting project and was curious if there was going to be more signage about what the habitat restoration was targeting, or more information about that project being posted.
Yeah, and Jennifer, chime in if you want to. There's several different restoration projects going on out at Minto. One is associated with a grant that ODFW has for turtle habitat restoration. And so a section of old trail that went out to the old boat dock that had basically fallen into the water, that asphalt was removed this summer. I can't remember when it was removed. And the fencing, and then the soil was actually really good for turtle nesting. And so that area is blocked off to allow it just to become more turtle habitat. And then there's a couple other spots where we're going to be working in the conservation area. Because we have several grants up there, and so there might have been some fencing up at the north end too. I'm not sure exactly where the fencing is you're talking about, Keith.
It was the one by the fishing pier, the old fishing.
Okay. Yeah.
I assumed it was turtle oriented, but anyway, looked like an interesting project. I was intrigued.
Yeah.
Excited to see it going up.
Well, Patricia, sorry, Paul, just one moment, just to follow up on that, if that's okay. I just am curious, is that something we have thought about putting signs up to educate the public? You know, this is, if you have the post there that you could put it on in terms of, you know, this is a turtle habitat in partnership with ODFW or something like that.
So ODFW, they don't like to advertise turtles too much. Because people go and mess with them. Then, you know, they either try to take them or they just, you know, so they're very concerned about putting up too much information. So what we've done is we put information in the kiosks, and then we just use a more generic term of restoration, because it could be any number of things, and that way we can use those signs over for different projects, and it's kind of a consistent message.
That makes sense. Thank you for that. I had no idea that was what the turtle signs would mean. So that's great to know. Unfortunate, but good to know. So Paul.
I know, it is unfortunate.
Oh, yeah, I just had it, since we're on Minto, since I go there about every morning, I've noticed that as you enter the park from River Road, as you're approaching the dog park, there's two big fields, both on your left and right, into the access that basically are just open, but I noticed they're being mowed right now, which I'm just wondering the purpose of that, since that seems to be more like a habitat area. And I'm just kind of wondering about birds in there and that kind of thing. I'm just wondering what the purpose of the mowing is right now.
Well, so those are ground nesting bird areas, so we don't mow them during the nesting season. Sorry, Jennifer. Please chime in here. It's your crew that mows them. But I believe they mow them in the fall just to knock down weeds.
Okay.
Jennifer, you're
on mute.
Sorry. We do rough mowing once a year in that area as a matter of practice. And Patricia's right. We do that when it's not in the migratory bird nesting season. So we try to, but we do it once a year just so that when it comes time later on in the year, you know, for fire season and all those kinds of things, it's already done by then.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer, as a mowing once a year, have you ever done any prescribed burning of those areas?
No, we have not. We have started to develop a policy in conjunction with Salem Fire Department relative to controlled burns. So we've kind of started that process for that potential in the future. But realistically, we would start kind of in a smaller, doing the burning method, like probably along right of ways, by sidewalks, things of that nature, before we did kind of a larger area. But it's in consultation and support of Salem Fire.
Great.
Jennifer, while we have you, oh, you're gone. Hopefully you can still hear me. A follow-up question on Minto in terms of, I noticed now that the new construction has been active, there's the walkway, when you're coming in from Riverfront, the walkway is blocked off. And so everyone's walking over the grass and riding bikes over the grass there unless they walk, if they're going out to the bridge opposed to going all the way around. And I just didn't know, is that preferable to creating some kind of temporary structure in terms of grass, just keeping the grass in good condition?
It is. So that we feel is kind of the least impactful way to address the issue. So yes, that's why.
All right. Any other questions for Patricia before we go into park operations update? All right. Well, thank you so much, Patricia. Well, we already have Jennifer on. So any questions about parks operations update? Yeah, Mickey.
Okay. My question was, is DPI still providing the weekly summary reports? And if they are, was there anything notable in the weekly reports we should know about?
So they do still provide those weekly reports. Most of it is just relative to their encounters with the park patrons. So really what's highlighted is for folks that maybe are starting, they provide support at Marion Square Park and Wallace Marine Park. Those are the only two parks that they provide security services for. Marion Square is not a sanctioned park, for example, relative to unsheltered individuals camping. So they will highlight when camping is starting to take place in Marion, and they have reached out to those unsheltered individuals, educating them that that's not an approved park for camping. So they typically kind of highlight those kind of interaction types of issues. And similarly at Wallace, if they're doing interactions with folks who either are camping in an unsanctioned area or who may be having some issues relative to camping in the parking lots. So those types of interactions are what's mostly highlighted. The rest are just kind of their routine kind of walking security paths and what they may see and notice.
Okay, thank you. And my reason for asking is because I do get asked from West Salem residents about what is going on with security, because the residents have concerns about the camping there in park. And so I just didn't know if there was anything that stood out that I could pass on to the neighborhood.
No, they're not no, there's the services they provide are monitoring services. And so, like I said, they'll do some initial outreach and so forth, but it's really to kind of highlight for us if they see something that's continuing problematic or folks who maybe are resistant to leaving, so that then we can share that information with SPD or other enforcement types of agencies. It's kind of out of DPI's focus or scope of work.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of reports, Jennifer, I was curious, does the park ranger give a report? And is that something that could be like shared with SPRAB if there is a report in terms of what they're seeing when they're out in the parks?
So they do. He actually provides a report on a daily basis on whatever shift he happens to be working his schedule. His schedule is flexible because he doesn't, in some cases, doesn't want to necessarily have a routine schedule, so that folks know, gosh, he's going to be here, so I don't want to be here at this time if he's trying to do some enforcement issues. But yes, he provides daily reports. And again, those kind of highlight everything from just kind of routine that he was walking around and maybe he saw a tree that was down that was potentially blocking part of a path, for example, or it could be that he's highlighting encounters that he may be having with parks patrons on, again, that educating them that there's no smoking or that dogs need to be on leashes, those kinds of things.
Understood. So
we can I'm sorry to interrupt you. So we can certainly, provide those and pass those on to SPRAB. Some, are pretty generic and not really super noteworthy. And then, some have a little bit more interaction level.
How do other members of the board feel about that? Would you like to be seeing those reports or updates?
Perhaps occasionally, because I know I also get questions about what's our, our park ranger and the good programs he does, but I'm curious about what the scope of his job.
Yeah, so his first priority is really kind of educating the park patrons on the rules of the parks. That's kind of, his initial encounters and roles. He does have authority to enforce no smoking in parks, dogs off leash, some parking issues. So it's limited authority compared to, obviously the authority that SPD or someone like that would have. And then as well is he provides, everything from Owl Prowl. So, he kind of has that community-based outreach with folks kind of talking about things in the park, talking about, like I said, animals that live in the park, so it's kind of a myriad, but his main focus is just to kind of educate and be available to assist park patrons, who may have questions or who may be unfamiliar with the park rules.
Just on an average, about how many citations is he issue a month? Not an average.
It is not a lot, because that's not that's not the goal of what we want him to do, or community, but he actually works for community development, but we have conversations in concert, obviously, since he's the parks ranger. So that's not the focus of what we want him to do. So when he issues citations, it's usually because he sees repeated behavior by particular individuals that he's already previously had encounters with and attempted to educate them. So it's more of kind of a last resort when he issues citations, but so it's a handful. It's not a lot. That's not, because that's not, we want his focus to be more from an educational standpoint as opposed to an enforcement standpoint.
Well, yeah, I as far as having seen his reports or so forth, I don't think we need to, for me personally, I don't need to see that level of detail of, of the day in and day out management of the park. So I personally wouldn't want to see them.
I'm happy to, in my monthly report to SPRAB, to have a component in there relative to park ranger activities. Now, his activities may change a little bit with a recent staff report to council to expand his geographic locations that he can provide services in. Before it was just for parks, and part of that staff report was to allow the ability that if we should have an issue in another park where we think it would be helpful for him to have a presence, that he has the ability for us to ask him, and he has the ability to do that. So there may be, some other types of information as his geographic region increases, some different types of interaction. But I certainly, as a component of my monthly report, kind of put in some information relative to park ranger activity. And I can certainly do that as well relative to, as long as we have, DPI to kind of, just bullet point some of the types of issues that they may be coming into contact with, if that would be helpful.
I would find that really helpful. I'm seeing other head nods as well. Woody, I see you were about to say something as well.
No, I just, yeah, we had, if anything, to see some information for at least one time, maybe even, and see what that information is, and then we can decide whether we thought of it relevant or not.
Thank you, Jennifer, for offering that. I think that'll be really helpful for us to see.
Okay.
I had a question about, so the SKCSD Salem-Keizer School District agreement, and I just know I've been hearing a lot about, in my professional job, about the conversations around outdoor learning and schools and parks in some cities, like New York City, for example, being the most prominent, having agreements in terms of outdoor learning and trying to find opportunities for the two to partner up. I know in Salem, we're probably looking a little bit further out in terms of schools reopening right now, but I'm just curious if that conversation has started between parks and schools, and if that's an opportunity as this agreement is being negotiated to make sure there's ample green space so there could be outdoor learning opportunities if needed when things do reopen.
So there used to be a cooperative use agreement between Salem Kaiser School District and the city of Salem. That agreement expired some years ago. And so there had been off and on conversations with the city and with the school district about revising that agreement and what that would look like with regard to using one another's space. Ultimately, the decision was made is that that agreement would not be renewed, and that in essence, what was the school district's property, they would be responsible for allowing access to and for permitting, and what was the city of Salem's land, our sites, we would be responsible for. Now, that does not mean that we cannot use one another's locations. It just would be when they're used that we would charge one another for that use. Before, in the previous cooperative use agreement, there was the ability that basically we didn't charge one another. They could give us by a certain time frame what their need would be, and vice versa. We would do that with the school district. But under the current lack of agreement and the determination for that to not renew that agreement is, again, we're responsible for each other's property. But if we wanted to use something on the school district property, there's a mechanism in place that we would ask to schedule their sites for whatever the purpose is we wanted, and then we would pay them for that use, and consequently they would do the same for ours. So there really, I guess the bottom line is at this point, there has not been dialogue since that determination was made, which was effective July 1st of this year. And part of that certainly could be because of the whole virtual component and folks not really being in schools, but there really hasn't been any dialogue. The agreement that I reference in my report is really, there was a second agreement with the school district, which is really relative to maintenance. We have several properties that previously that we maintain part of on the school district site. If they were using, because of the cooperative use agreement, they maintain some city property. And so this has really been, and it started quite some time, probably a year or so ago, really started so that in essence, kind of the same principle, what is the school district's property, they would maintain. What is the city property, we would maintain. Now, there are some properties where there would be an exception to that because the park property is adjacent to the school district. And so, they kind of go over one another, some overlap there. So what the maintenance agreement is attempting to do is to deal with those locations where there's overlap on who is responsible for what part of those overlapping areas. So that's what we're trying to finalize. There's just a couple of locations, specifically Inglewood and McKay, that have been identified that we're trying to work through. So it's currently with the school district for their review, and we're waiting for their response to the language that was provided so that we can get that finalized and get that in place. So it's really kind of just a clarifying document on who's going to maintain what for those, again, those kind of overlapping areas.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think I would just plug for the future as we look to next year and things opening, if there are opportunities. It seems like there's some neat things happening across the country with parks and school districts. And Dave, this is your line of work as well. Just thinking about if there are ways that could be increased, or just an opportunity for COVID-specific relationship building, something to think about. But we can cross that bridge when we get there.
Well, I will say though, just to backtrack a little bit, last year, park staff, a couple of our park staff, there was a SPRAB science teacher, biology teacher, who was very interested in doing some biology work on park property that was adjacent to SPRAB. And they reached out to us, and we had some meetings with them so that in essence, he could take his class out there and they could kind of do that. So there has been a little bit of start with that. He wanted to kind of develop a plan for that to happen. this year that the current school year we're in, and obviously that, has kind of been, so there has been a little bit of dialogue just from individual, school teacher who's reached out about those opportunities to take advantage of some locations for some outdoor classroom learning. So, but there's just been the one, but it's a start, kind of thing, what you're talking about.
That's great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, there is some collaboration too when there's a parks master plan, like recently Woodmansee, where the school district, myself and the principal at Judson Middle School met online, of course, with the city staff and talked about the parks master plan. And we do that so that we could plan for if there's any school uses that could take advantage of the park and vice versa. So we do that. I mean, it's coordination.
Great. Woody, I know you had raised a concern via email about Salem Awakening. Did you want to bring that up?
Yes, I would like to. I want to get on the record about my concerns about what happened down at this summer down at Riverfront Park with Salem Awakenings 2020. Maybe I could get Jennifer or Becky or both to do a quick little history of that.
Yeah, Becky can chime in with more details if you want them. But I know that question was addressed earlier on when they were actively utilizing the park at Riverfront for their daily events. But they concluded Labor Day. But what transpired is initially when they reached out to the city, it was prior to COVID being in place and the governor's guidelines being established relative to events. So when they reached out initially, it was early on, and we didn't have the guidelines, and they were asking about the use virtually on a daily basis for several months. So at that time, Becky, in having her conversation with them relative to their use, and her and I had lots of discussion because of the quantity of days that they wanted to use, so many, was not problematic initially. Again, because we didn't have the guidelines from OHA and the governor at that point in time. It was relayed to them at the beginning that because we didn't have those guidelines, that as circumstances changed, if they did change, that may impact their permit. But that being said, because there was limited use and a lot of things had already, started to be canceled over the summer, we did allow for and permit for that activity to transpire. Subsequently, we got governor's guidelines relative to events. There's the governor's guidelines, just to clarify, are not all encompassing for everything that happens outdoors. There are specific guidelines relative to sporting events, indoors and outdoors. There's different guidelines for events. There's things, so they don't necessarily always mirror or aren't cookie cutters of one another's, but the guidelines we received relative to events indicated that if we were to permit an event, that we needed to provide, the city would need to provide a social distancing or sanitization monitor. One staffer had to be a city employee, couldn't just be a volunteer or somebody that was maybe attending the event, that the city would be responsible for providing one attendant monitor for every 50 people that were attending the event. So when that guideline came out, the city, a myriad of levels, including the city, up to the city manager, talked about the impact of those types of gatherings. And then, what we would have to do to support those guidelines. And if you were not able to support it, then in essence, you could not permit it and sanction it. So in those discussions, it was determined that park staff is not able, both either, financially to support paying a staff person overtime for several hours every night to monitor. And again, it's one person for every 50 people. So depending on the size of the event and the numbers that they were indicating, it would be several staff folks. So we just don't have the staff or the financial means to be able to support that. So it was decided that any permits, it wasn't just for Salem Awakenings, it was for anyone who previously had submitted a facility use permit. So anyone who had submitted that event prior to COVID transpiring, is that we would have to cancel that permit. So we did that across the board. It did not preclude then, once the permit is canceled, any park, anyone can go and have drop-in use. The difference with drop-in use is we obviously don't support the event. We're not sanctioning the event. We don't provide services and, electricity and water and all of those kinds of things for the event. But anyone can patronize the parks. The parks are open and anyone can drop in and do anything. Now, if we're aware that that's going to transpire, then we certainly relay to them that it is the expectation that they follow the governor's guidelines while they're having their event. So that's the social distancing, the wearing the masks, all of that. So all of that, there was lots of communication, and all of that was relayed to Salem Awakenings. And any, I know we're specifically talking about Salem Awakenings, but that was the same message that was provided to the yoga class or Salem Awakenings. Salem Awakenings chose to continue to hold their event down at the park. So it was not a permitted, sanctioned event. We encouraged them and reminded them and told them that, that they were needing to wear the masks and to provide the social distancing aspects of those guidelines. But there is not a mechanism in place for us to be down there and enforce that. Similar to anywhere else kind of out into the public domain that, folks are expected to follow the governor's guidelines and wear masks, but we also always see folks who don't necessarily follow those. There's not an enforcement mechanism for that to transpire. So they continue to hold those events. We continue to encourage them, again, to follow the guidelines. And, there became some furor with regard to the fact that, in their opinion, we had revoked their permit and had not allowed that to transpire. We didn't revoke their permit. We simply canceled. In our opinion, there was a difference. We just canceled all permits because we couldn't support it and meet the governor's guidelines, which was what the guidelines indicated needed to happen if we could not provide that support. So Becky can chime in with more details or add any things, but that's kind of what transpired. So they continued to do that through Labor Day because in their mind, we did not provide them electricity. We did not provide them sound. We did not provide any support whatsoever to their event.
Okay, I didn't realize you didn't provide them electricity. How did they get electricity to operate their equipment?
They didn't have electricity for that. That was just their I don't know, Becky, what was the type of system that they used? But there was no electricity provided whatsoever to them. It was just the type of sound thing that they used, but we didn't provide any support.
Right. There was power there is power in the amphitheater, but they had some sort of generator, battery powered PA system that they used.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure because it is required to use amplified sound. That's when the permit is required. And
we will say that there was monitoring done of the decibel level just to ensure, even though we weren't providing them electricity, and they did not exceed the decibel level where a permit would have been required.
Right. A lot of the activity, when I went down and took the sound meter and monitored, A lot of the activity that they did do music, they had keyboards and stuff like that there, but a lot of the time was spent speaking. And you couldn't, in my experience when I was down there, you could not hear the speaking. Once you got over to the playground area, you couldn't hear it at all. So it was determined at that point that they didn't necessarily qualify for even needing a sound permit.
Okay, I was getting really concerned because you go to their website and they have videos of each one of their
Yeah.
Nightly church meetings,
Yeah.
and the pastor or whatever would have a microphone, and then the people would come down front, and even though at first they separated, they were a little ways away from each other, but then they would reach up and grab the microphone, and the microphone ended up getting passed around from person to person. And so I guess it's not much we can do about it. I guess if they don't exceed the decibels, but I didn't realize that they meant they had their own power. So I was trying to think that we could somehow manage that by not giving them access to power. But there was that concert. What about the concert that was on the weekend that showed up in the newspaper? There was a pretty good number of people in there. Was what powered their equipment, or do you know what came about with that big concert they had down there?
Yeah. So
It was partially put on by Salem Awakenings.
So we, and Becky can chime in, but we have not provided power or electricity or anything to any of those events. Those are all unpermitted, unsanctioned drop-in events. In most cases, not in all cases, but in a majority of the cases, is they didn't even reach out to make contact with us. Now, in that particular one, I think Becky can relay if this is accurate, but we found out about it through SPD, who kind of was aware that these folks were coming in, so kind of alerted us to the fact that they were coming down. But a lot of these, rallies or organizations didn't reach out to us at all. They just simply dropped in and used the park for their purposes. But we didn't provide anything for any of those.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
They, like Jennifer said, they're a drop-in kind of situation. And right now, with the climate in our communities, there are a lot of requests that we receive. Some of them we don't receive at all. In the case of that concert, I think the day before, I got an email asking about them wanting to do some things like bring in chemical toilets and things like that. And without those types of activities are only allowed when we can issue a permit, and we weren't issuing permits at that time. So they just dropped in and used the facility, and it was a right to assemble, and they used it kind of as a free speech opportunity, I think, too. So,
okay.
But we didn't provide them power.
And I will say at that particular event, given that the nature of what the concert was and the organizer who of that, their whole agenda was contrary to wearing masks, let's say. That was the whole intent of that gathering. So there was concern with regard to the number of participants potentially, that was guesstimated or estimated that might attend, and then the impact that might have with that number of folks. So there were SPD officers who were down at the park during that, just to they didn't stop them from doing anything that they were doing. They were just there simply as a presence. So if there should be an issue or any type of need, but they didn't limit their activity. There was not a need for that to happen. They didn't limit any of their activity. We're unclear. It was never really relayed to us how much that they were encouraging folks while they were there to make sure they social distance and wear masks, things of those nature. Again, given the nature of what the event was, it probably would have, not been receptively received. But regardless, there was on that particular one, because of the number of folks, there's some SPD officers down there.
Okay, I appreciate. I'm sorry to tie up so much time on this, but I was very concerned about this. So
Thank you, Woody. No, I appreciate
thank
it.
you.
I think it's good for us to have it on record, like you said, to have talked about it as a board, and just make sure that it was a discussion point, especially with the
So-
Students Journal article that came out as well.
Yeah. So the only other thing, and Jennifer may have mentioned this and I may have missed it, but there was a lot of communication going about with city staff and our legal department, our emergency operations center, city manager's office, department directors. There was a lot of input that was received, and everybody communicated, and a lot of that direction came directly from the city manager's office and the emergency operations center.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky and Jennifer. I know that it was a hard position to be put in too. It's in terms of dealing with a very unprecedented situation, and just the whole situation in general was challenging. So I really appreciate both of you handling that.
Certainly.
Any other questions on parks operations before we move to recreation? Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer. Becky, we'll have you stay on for a second here about any recreation service update questions that folks might have. One quick question I had was, I see they have the Owl Prowl scheduled, which sounds really fun. And I was just curious if people were still tuning in for that, just given COVID and everything. Are you getting pretty good numbers and receptivity?
Yeah, and Melinda will talk about it a little bit too. We did one last year. We try to do those on the evenings where we have a full moon for light purposes and that type of thing. But it was popular. Right now, because of COVID, we're going to have to kind of monitor that a little bit. Perhaps if it's the one that we're doing in November, I think it's on the 13th, is popular, we may add another one in January. But between Melinda and the park ranger, Mike, that lead that, it is a popular event. It's kind of a neat thing. I think the last time they actually got to see some owls. Sometimes it's kind of a hopefully it's not a hit or miss, it's a hit, but you never know.
Wonderful. Any other questions for Becky?
I was curious for the other programs, that Owl Prowl, which I personally was really excited to see on there. The other ones, that one mentions being led by the park ranger. The other classes, who is it that leads those? Is that city staff? Is that volunteer work?
Well, it wouldn't be a volunteer. It would be a combination of either our staff, or a lot of times, like in the example of Owl Prowl, obviously it's a city staff. It's our park ranger, and then Melinda goes as well usually. But the other classes that we're offering are a combination. They're either run by city staff, our recreation staff that we hire are kind of seasonal staff, or it could be a contract class. It just depends on the program. Sometimes we have a contract class in which we contract with a person or a business, a local business that, for instance, we did a self-defense type class, things like that. It's a local contractor that actually leads the program. So it just kind of depends. It's on a program by program basis.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Becky. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I see we have Melinda, who's going to give us a verbal update.
So we finished our summer, and given the circumstances with COVID-19, consider it very successful. We had over 800 kids come through the program during the summer. Knock on wood, we didn't have any reports of COVID occur in our camps. we followed the governor's guidelines very strictly on how many kids we could have in groups and how many instructors for those kids and things like that. And we were really fortunate. We had healthy staff all summer also. So that was nice. And we had tennis was one of our popular programs, along with all of our outdoor camps, like the wilderness survival camps. And the summer parks program continued to be rather popular. It was a lot less kids. We normally host it in 4 parks, and we hosted it in 2 this summer, but we still had quite a few kids at those 2 locations. And then the Stride events were really popular as well. And we just wrapped up our last Stride event this past Saturday, which was held at Minto. We did it in person with rolling starts, excuse me. So we had a 10K, and then we had 2 start times for the 5K participants. And we had a total of 40 people come out, which was kind of a lot, really, for the COVID situation.
That's great. Thank you so much for that update. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, well, thank you so much, Melinda. Really appreciate it.
Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Hi, Billy. Are you going to give an update for us as well?
Yeah, Becky kind of gave a highlight of our numbers of where we were at as of last month and this month. We are actually finishing up. Hopefully tomorrow night it does not start raining till after 10:30, and we will have gotten in all of our shortened seasons, as she had told you guys in the reports earlier in September. We did not end up running our full amount this year. We lost 12 weeks, which is pretty much our spring summer combined league. And we ended up running summer and fall kind of split in the middle, 8 weeks each. We had 88 teams in softball, which normally we have somewhere around 150 to 190, just depending on the type of teams, doubleheaders and singles. And then we had 24 kickball teams, and we normally have 68 or so during a year. Kind of broke down to about 2,000 players with the 2 of them combined. Playing ball in the adult leagues. Normally we're somewhere in that 35 to 4,000 range. So we were down about little more than half. We had, we were a little above 50%. We canceled, like I said, the first 12 weeks of league and tournaments. We ended up running 11 weekends of tournaments out of 14 that were scheduled. A couple of the slow pitch tournaments, because they relied heavily on Washington players to play in their tournaments out of the Portland teams and Vancouver teams. Decision was made after talking to the governor's office contact that we should not be allowing people to come to our area that weren't supposed to be playing in their own area, because they were trying to keep the spread of the virus in their own area from happening. So we pretty much played with all Oregon teams from the middle of July. When we opened up on the last week of June, we were doing social distancing with masks recommended, just like we were everywhere else in the state. By the second week, we went to, for the younger kids, that everybody had to wear a mask when they were inside the complex. We never allowed spectators in. It was just players and coaches and team staff this year. And then for the youth tournaments, the parents social distanced out and around. You guys were kind of asking what kind of things the Ranger did. He was my social distancing educator this summer. My staff did it, but Mike, with his uniform, gave a little more authority to it. And he was very good at it. And people appreciated his education way of telling them stuff. So, and then about the 24th, we went to mask. At that point, you didn't have to have the mask on when you were on the field by the guidelines. The governor's office changed it that if you couldn't maintain 6 feet at all times in a sport, you should not be playing, or you should be wearing a mask. We wore masks all summer. Adults starting on the 23rd, which was a Friday. I spent the whole evening out there talking to the coaches and went to it. Just like in public anywhere else, some people fought us on it over the summer, pulling them down, not putting them up. But for a majority, I will tell you, I won't know girls from the younger ages unless they're wearing a mask, because I know their eyeballs up when they come in the gate and show me their wristbands. So it's just, it was a different year. Like I said, we held over 11 tournaments. We only ended up having one slow pitch adult tournament because they just couldn't get enough teams together. We ended up with 7 fast pitch, which 4 of those we ran successfully with some pretty good numbers. And then 2 baseball tournaments. One of those baseball tournaments was a scheduled one that moved to the summer because theirs got canceled earlier. And then they jumped on a weekend when slow pitch canceled. They were supposed to be playing all around town at different ballparks or different fields that we had and out in Kaiser. And they brought majority of them to our place. And then we had one senior regional tournament, which was really our only big tournament for out of state. And that was held before the governor's office recommended no out of state people. And that was pretty successful. You know, when you have 55 to 90-year-old guys who just wear the mask because that's the only way they're being allowed to play, because they were the first adult tournament that was told by their organization that they had to wear masks. They did it. So we ended up canceling our 2020 national, which was the 10B Western National for USA Softball. And it has been given to us to host in 2022 because 2021s were all bid out already and it wouldn't be fair to the towns that are supposed to have them. Plus we already had one in 2021. So excited about that because we really love the 10B tournament. It's a huge economic impact. And then we didn't have any rainouts. We had 2 smokeouts. Lost 2 weekends and 2 weeks of league almost to the smoke. And we would have been done completely on October 4th with our leagues. But like I said, we're finishing tomorrow night. And then we will be closing the park down to get prepared for the winter and some major field maintenance on 2 of the fields starting next week. And then all 5 fields are going to have their lips rephrased, which we have not done ever on our infields. It's a new method that they came up with about 4 or 5 years ago. And instead of cutting your grass back and making your lips fresher, you freeze it down and let it regrow over the winter time. So, which will keep the ball from hopping up when it hits the lip. So very excited about that. So I think I covered everything I had in my notes. If you guys had any other questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you so much, Billy. That's great. Lots of good information and really exciting to hear that so much was accomplished despite all the setbacks this year.
We had a great help from a lot of people in town. I will tell you, we take a lot of phone calls on how we're doing it from other towns. We are one of 3 towns, Medford, I forget, that ran leagues pretty much September, July, August, and September. Everybody else is still shut down. We are the only ones until this coming weekend. Medford's doing it to host a USA softball tournament. The rest of them were canceled all statewide. So we were blessed with the way our city management let us give us a try, and it went well. I mean, I don't know what we'll do next year when we hopefully don't have to do all this stuff, because we got a lot of set up out there, but it worked, and had a lot of happy people that let them play ball.
Perfect. Thank you. Keith, I see you had your.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm one of those happy people. So really appreciated the opportunity to play and as part of the slow pitch men's rec league a couple seasons over this year, and so I was glad the city found a way to do it, and appreciate all the efforts to do it. The staff were great, the umps were great, and yeah, we all found a way to make it work. So I really appreciated those Tuesday evenings to be able to be out there on the field. Thanks for that.
That was the night I worried about, just because it's a guy's night, but we really did not have, we had a few guys, but you go to stores and you have a few people that don't want to wear their masks. So, I mean, it wasn't a huge deal, and most of them did it. So, and my staff, like they said, they felt like they were babysitters at times, but like I told them, you're getting paid to babysit. So let's get it done.
yeah, it was great. We had a good time with it and had a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Any other questions or comments for Billy? All right, thank you so much, Billy. Appreciate that.
Thank you guys, and thanks for all your support.
Absolutely. All right, we're getting towards the end of our agenda. We do have our new business section, and I had one thing I wanted to share real quick, and then I'll open it up to everyone else for new business. I know we're past our time, so I'll be as brief as possible. I've been really interested in how as SPRAB we can be doing more public outreach as board members to educate people about what SPRAB is. I think a lot of the public from what I've found doesn't really know we exist, doesn't realize we're an outlet for parks related questions or inquiries or ideas. And so I think that it's a real opportunity for us. I think I mentioned a while back, we talked about a fact sheet that I wanted us to create that we could all carry around. And so I'm going to share my screen. I started working with Tony on this over the end of the summer, and then the fires set us back a little bit that we haven't had a chance to talk about it. So what I was hoping is, I'm just going to share this now. Can everyone see this Word doc that I have there? Oh, yeah. Now I lost the videos. Look at that. There they are. Okay, I'm seeing some nodding. Everyone can see that? Okay, perfect. So this is a very rough starting point, but I was writing down some of the ideas that I had, and Tony helped fill in some of this as well. And so what I was hoping is to just share what I had today, and then Tony can send this out to folks. And then if you could make some comments via email, any ideas that you have to Tony for what could be included, then by next month, hopefully we'll be able to present more of a polished version, and then we can work on making it nice for everyone to have on hand. But as I mentioned, really just making sure we all have the data on top of mind, and then ideally someday making a little handout that we can have and have it on the city website, and all this information be accessible so people really know all the great things. 89 parks, 66 miles of trail, 24% canopy cover. These are impressive figures. And then also just having at the bottom here more information about our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, why it exists, and the functions we serve. So as I mentioned, we'll send this around, but are there any big ideas just about how we structure this fact sheet, or categories we should include, or anything like that that folks want to discuss now? Yeah, Diana.
Yeah, so the one thing that just kind of jumps out at me, and I love this, by the way, I think this is great. I think it's something that will be really useful. And so I just was looking at where it says Salem has 24% tree canopy, a 6% increase in the last year. I'm just thinking a little bit about being careful not to date something, because, with everyone's best intentions that, this will get updated, regularly or whatever, sometimes that doesn't happen. So just thinking about that as we're thinking about what to put on here, if we're just being careful not to put things that would make it that we have to update it at particular intervals or something. I mean, we might, because we may get new parks or that kind of thing, which is great. But if there's like obvious things, I would just caution about that.
That's really good feedback. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, also, these are just numbers, and I'm not sure they sometimes mean too much to people just on the face. It'd be nice if we could do some sort of comparison with other cities of how Salem compares, because I think on probably many levels, we compare quite favorably with many other cities as far as number of parks or acres per capita, that kind of thing. It'd be nice to have a little bit of that on there if it's available.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Dave. Oh, Dave, you're on mute, or at least I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Sorry.
There you go.
You might think about including this in the annual report, because that would trigger the update if it's needed, because we review that every year.
This is a really smart idea. Great. Let's see, stop my screen share there. So I'll ask Tony to send that out to everyone, and I'd love just for people to send some ideas in, and I think this will really help us all have some really good handy facts that we can share with folks. I know just an update for everyone. I've been trying to do some more outreach. I've been reaching out to members of council just to let them know that I'm out here and to talk about SPRAB, that just being a resource. And it's been really good to have some of those intro conversations. Councillor Nordyke invited me to speak at her Ward 7 meeting later this month, just to let the folks know about SPRAB. Mylan, I know if you're still on, I know you're going to be on the agenda as well. So you and I can touch base on that later. I'm planning to be very general, but just let people know SPRAB is out here and hopefully to come to us with any questions or ideas. Patricia, I see you jumped on. Did you
Yeah,
want to say something?
yeah, I just wanted to suggest that before it goes out to the board, the FAQs, is that staff take another look at that, because I see a couple of, like, the tree canopy did not increase in 1 year. It was over the last decade. So I think we should just take another look at it before we send it out for further edits.
That sounds great to me. Wonderful. And so let's definitely do that. And then the other idea that I had was I want to give Mickey some kudos that in the West Salem newspaper, she had a wonderful write-up on the West Salem Neighborhood Association. And I thought that was really helpful, just going through what the West Salem Neighborhood Association is and how to get involved. And I thought, given we have so many West Salem folks on SPRAB, that it could be interesting in the next couple of months maybe to do something similar to follow Mickey's lead. And if we were to write just a little thing about what SPRAB is and co-sign it with all of us. Just knowing that we're all over here if folks want to connect with us on parks issues or when we meet usually.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it was it's great to be able to provide that information for the community, and because you're right, a lot of people don't know what all these different organizations are.
Yeah, so we'll start with our fact sheet, and I think I encourage anyone that's not over here in West Salem, where we have Mickey really heading up our neighborhood association now, which is wonderful, but make sure that you've connected with your neighborhood association, and I'm going to keep trying to connect with members of the public and getting the word out there, and I think this fact sheet will help with that. So next time we can talk a little bit more about it, but I'd love to just keep this conversation going and make sure that people come to us beyond just the appeals, and we get a lot of testimony then, but I want to get more of the testimony like today, where we can think about systems and how we can make sure we're improving the parks for everyone. Any other new business that folks would like to raise for today? Mickey, are you talking? I think you're on mute.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm fine.
All right, I'm not hearing anything else. Our next meeting is going to be November 12th, so we will see you all in a month. And unless there's any final comments from staff, I guess I should leave that out there just because we're virtual and I can't see everyone. Patricia, anything?
Just to remind people that there's a work session with council on trees on October 19th. So if you're interested in that, you can tune in.
Yes, I plan to be there, but there's no public comment allowed, correct? It's just participation or just listening.
Correct. And can you be there? I'm not even sure if it's all virtual, I think. Yeah. Okay.
I'm using that very selectively or just very generally nowadays that I'm just gonna be there.
Gotcha. You might be the only person there, Dylan.
Tony, I see you've chimed in the video. Do you have anything to add for us before we close out?
I do. I just want to remind everyone that the Woodmansee Park virtual open house, the second open house, is now available.
Oh, Tony, we lost your audio. At least it cut out for me.
Oh, well, if Patricia, can you hear me? Can you make a plug for the Woodmansee open house? Can you hear me at all?
I think we heard you on that part of it. So
okay.
Yeah, so the Woodmansee open house is open until the 19th. So please go to the web. If you just go to the opening page of the city's website, it's the main feature story. So yeah, take the survey, please.
Everyone should have received an email on this through a MailChimp email listserv. If you're hearing me, did everyone receive one? I hope.
I know I received one. Hopefully everyone else did. And if you did not, go ahead and reach out to Tony afterwards and make sure you're on that list.
Yes, please do. I'll send out the link to everyone too. Thank you.
Well, Great work, everyone, tonight. Really appreciate. I think we have, I'm really excited about how that letter came out and the findings, and appreciate all the engagement there. I hope to see a few of you at the tree council meeting later this month, but otherwise I will see you all on November 12th. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.